In the wilderness, survival is all about life or death. There are no second chances out here. You make a mistake, and the wild will make you pay, often with your life. Over the years, trappers, hunters, and pioneers mastered the wild. These weren't just skills they picked up. They were a way of life, etched into their very being by the unforgiving landscapes they called home. They learned to read the signs, to listen to the whispers of the wind, and to respect the raw power of nature. They built shelter in minutes, not with modern tools, but with what the forest provided, their hands, and an incredible understanding of natural engineering. They set traps that fed them through brutal winters, ingenious contraptions born of necessity, and a deep knowledge of animal behavior. Today, most of these techniques have faded into history, lost in a world of modern convenience where a GPS and a smartphone seem like essentials. But out here in the untamed wild, those skills meant everything. In this episode, we're bringing them back 7 forgotten survival techniques that kept mountain men alive. If you ever find yourself out in the wilderness, some of these could save your life. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Right, first up, we're diving into the world of the trapper. Beaver pelts were like gold back in the day, a currency that drove men deep into uncharted territory. But beavers, they're clever creatures, incredibly wary. The mountain men had a secret weapon caster lure. The key ingredient, castoreum. This is a secretion from the castor sacs of beavers located near the base of their tail. To a beaver, this smell is an irresistible invitation or a challenge, something they absolutely have to investigate. The trappers would carefully harvest these glands from beavers they'd already caught, understanding that nothing goes to waste in the wild. Once dried, the castoreum would be grated or ground into a powder. This potent powder formed the base of their lure, a substance so effective it's almost like a chemical attractant designed by nature itself. To make the lure even more enticing, they'd often mix this castoreum powder with other ingredients like nutmeg, cloves, cinnamon, or even a splash of alcohol. The alcohol also acted as a preservative and helped the scent disperse, especially in damp conditions near beaver dams and lodges. Once the lure was mixed into a paste or a thick liquid, the application was key. They'd find a likely beaver run, a place where beavers frequently traveled. Then, they'd make what's called a scent mound, a small pile of mud and sticks on the water's edge, mimicking the kind of mound a beaver itself would make to mark its territory. A tiny dab of this potent castor lure on the mound was all it took. The unsuspecting beaver swimming by would catch a whiff of this intriguing scent and swim over to investigate, where a trap would be cleverly concealed. Alright, next up, clothing. In the wild, what you wear isn't about fashion, it's about survival. The frontiersmen needed garments that were tough, durable, and flexible. Their material of choice, buckskin. Turning a raw deer hide into soft buckskin is labor-intensive, relying on animal brains. It starts with a fresh deer hide. The first step is fleshing, scraping away meat, fat, and membrane. Then the hair is removed by soaking the hide. Now comes brain tanning. The deer's brain is mashed and worked into the hide. The hide is stretched and worked over a log. Finally, the hide is smoked to make it water-resistant and give it color. The result is durable, flexible buckskin clothing. Navigating the American frontier meant encountering formidable obstacles, and one of the biggest was rivers. The mountain men, ever resourceful, developed a remarkable craft for these situations, the bullboat. The primary component was a buffalo hide, a single, large, tough hide from a mature bull, hence the name. Next they needed a frame. This was typically made from willow saplings, which are pliable and strong. The mountain men would cut young willow branches, ideally about thumb thickness, and bend them into a circular or oval shape, forming the rim of the boat. Then, cross pieces of willow would be lashed into place, creating a basket-like framework. The genius of the bullboat lay in its simplicity and speed of construction. Once the frame was ready, the fresh buffalo hide would be stretched over it, flesh side out. The edges of the hide would be pulled up and lashed tightly to the willow rim. As the hide dried, it would shrink, tightening around the frame like a drum, creating a remarkably taut and relatively watertight vessel. Any small holes or seams would be caulked with a mixture of buffalo tallow and ash, or sometimes pine resin, to improve its water resistance. These bullboats were not designed for long voyages or navigating rapids. They were essentially for ferrying people, equipment, and valuable furs across rivers. Despite their somewhat clumsy appearance, bullboats were incredibly buoyant and could carry a surprising amount of weight. Their shallow draft meant they could navigate relatively shallow waters. They were also lightweight enough, once emptied, to be carried by 1 or 2 men, making them portable for overland stretches between river crossings. The bullboat is a fantastic example of adaptive technology. Crossing rivers in a bullboat was one thing, but navigating vast uncharted river systems without maps or GPS? That was an entirely different level of skill. Their lives and livelihoods depended on their ability to read the river, to understand its moods, its dangers, and its hidden pathways. One of the first things a mountain man would assess was the river's current. They learned to spot the telltale signs of fast water, dangerous eddies, and submerged obstacles. A smooth, glassy surface might look inviting, but it could hide a powerful undertow. Conversely, choppy water or standing waves often indicated shallows or rocks just beneath the surface. Water levels were another critical factor. A river could be a gentle giant one day and a raging torrent the next, especially after heavy rains or spring thaws in the mountains. The frontiersmen would look for drift lines on the banks, noting how high the water had recently been. They'd observe the color of the water too. Muddy, silt-laden water often meant it was swollen and carrying debris, making navigation more perilous. They also paid close attention to the riverbanks. The type of vegetation, the steepness of the banks, and signs of erosion all provided clues. Understanding river bends and meanders was also crucial. The outside of a bend typically has faster, deeper water and is often where the channel erodes the bank. In the wilderness, fire is life. It means warmth, cooking, safety, and hope. For frontiersmen, making fire quickly was a survival skill. Their method? Flint, steel, and char cloth. Strike high-carbon steel against flint. This shaves off tiny steel particles. The friction heats and ignites these particles. It requires practice and the right materials. Char cloth is carbonized cotton or linen. It catches even the faintest spark. When you're hundreds of miles from the nearest settlement, carrying enough food to survive is a monumental challenge. Food is heavy, it spoils, and hunting can be unreliable. The mountain men, and the Native Americans from whom they learned this, had an incredible solution: pemmican. This wasn't just trail mix, it was a super concentrated, nutrient-dense survival food that could last for months, even years, without refrigeration. The primary ingredient in pemmican was dried meat, usually bison, but elk, deer, or moose would also work. The meat would be cut into thin strips and dried thoroughly, either by hanging it in the sun and wind or by slowly smoking it over a low fire. The goal was to remove as much moisture as possible, making the meat incredibly light and resistant to spoilage. Once the meat was bone dry, it would be pounded into a coarse powder or fine shreds. The next key ingredient was rendered fat, typically bison tallow. The fat would be carefully rendered down, meaning it was melted slowly to separate the pure fat from any meat scraps or impurities. This pure, clarified fat was essential. It provided a huge caloric punch, crucial for energy in a demanding environment, and it also acted as a preservative, sealing the dried meat away from air and moisture. To this mixture of pounded dried meat and hot rendered fat, they would often add dried berries. The hot liquid fat would be poured over the pounded meat and berries, and the whole concoction would be mixed thoroughly until every particle of meat was coated. Once mixed, the still warm pemmican would be packed tightly into rawhide bags or pouches. As the fat cooled, it would solidify, binding all the ingredients together into a dense, solid block. Pemmican was the perfect travel food. For the frontiersmen, hunting wasn't a sport, it was a matter of survival. Supermarkets didn't exist in the wilderness. If you didn't successfully hunt, you didn't eat. But animals are elusive, wary, and perfectly adapted to their environment. To find them, the mountain men had to become master trackers, fluent in the silent language of the wild, the art of reading animal signs. Tracks were, of course, fundamental. A skilled tracker could tell not just what kind of animal made the track. Deer, elk, bear, beaver, but also its size, its sex, whether it was injured, and how fast it was moving. The depth of the track indicated weight, the spacing between tracks, the gait, revealed its speed, walking, trotting, running. Fresh, sharp-edged tracks meant the animal was close. Older, weathered tracks told a different story. But tracking was so much more than just following footprints. They looked for droppings or scat. The freshness, shape, size, and content of scat provided a wealth of information. Fresh, moist droppings meant the animal was nearby. The contents revealed its diet: berries, grasses, or hair and bones from a recent kill. This helped them understand the animal's habits and where it might be foraging. Disturbed vegetation was another key indicator. A broken twig, a patch of flattened grass where an animal had bedded down, nibbled leaves or bark. All these were clues. So there you have it. 7 incredible skills that were once the bedrock of survival on the American frontier. These weren't just handy tips. They were the difference between life and death, day in and day out. Preparation, knowledge, and a deep respect for the power of nature. That's what saw these pioneers through. They understood that the wilderness demands your full attention, your utmost ingenuity. The wild doesn't care if you're tired or cold or unprepared. It has its own rules, ancient and unforgiving. Either you know how to play the game, how to read the signs, how to provide for yourself, or you don't. There's no middle ground out here. Thanks for watching Wild America. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more survival tips and adventures.